sitting in my empty rental, a 2-big townhouse that belonged to a friend of mine. I had just left my husband, taking with me everything he let me have, which was basically only the stuff that I had before meeting him and my mom's dog, Doc. Doc was providing the soundtrack for my miserable first night alone in 7 years. A 30-pound border collie mutt with a broken tail that had healed at a 90-degree horizontal angle, and so much uncontainable energy that he vibrated in place on the rare occasion he wasn't running in circles. Doc paced nervously. His wails of despair echoed, making my misery that much more complete. As I stared at Doc, contemplating murder, I took comfort in the thought that he had to die soon. Doc had been my mom's dog. She adopted him from a shelter when I was in college. He had been repeatedly beaten, run over with a car, and left for dead. It was a miracle he had lived to be adopted. It was his that melted my mom's heart and made her choose him. Of course, when we got him home from the shelter, we realized that he all the time. Doc was my mom's constant companion for 9 years. Despite a lot of whining, thankfully, eventually it was not all the time, he made her very happy. So when my mom got sick with cancer, she and Doc moved in with me, my husband Jason, and our 2 85-pound labs. Doc, who was generally afraid of men and especially nervous around men like my husband, who hated him, became an even tighter wound ball of nerves. My dogs could sit, stay, heel, and be quiet. Doc could not stay still for a second, running circles around our tiny living room, driving me insane. When we'd go on our daily walks, Doc tried to commit suicide by choking himself at the end of the leash the entire time. And Doc, being the nervous dog that he was, picked up and once again ceaselessly began. My mom died 3 months after moving in with us, leaving Doc to me, despite Jason's hatred of the dog. I tried to reassure Jason by telling him he wouldn't have to live with the crazy dog forever. Doc was 10 years old. He had to die soon. A year and a half later, as I sat there in that empty townhouse, alone for the first time with Doc, I hated him for having been the 3rd dog. If we didn't have Doc, maybe I could have kept my dogs, my perfect, beautiful, quiet labs. Instead, I got the problem child, the one who just wouldn't die. But my mom had loved him, and I figured I might as well make the best of a bad situation. So I tried to treat Doc like he was a real dog. I started taking him running with me, and without the other 2 dogs to compete with, he could almost heal. I mean, at least he didn't choke himself the whole time. And meal times became less chaotic since I didn't have to rush Doc to finish his food before the labs got to it. Doc would always wait for me before he'd eat, so it was kind of like having a dinner companion. And Doc would sleep with me, and he, unlike the labs, did not take up the entire bed. Doc and I played fetch, kind of. I mean, I'd throw the ball and he'd go get it, and then he'd drop it somewhere along the way, but it was almost a good trick. And I don't know if it was because he became more comfortable with me or if it was just because he didn't have my ex-husband or dogs making him nervous, but his whining diminished. I mean, he would still every time I came home, picked up his leash, picked up my keys, went near his food, or a million other things, but it was no longer incessant, and my ears were able to stop bleeding. When I bought my own townhouse, I got a couple of roommates to help pay the mortgage. They loved Doc. He was still crazy, but in an endearing kind of way. Everyone loved the way when he got really excited, his running in circles would turn into leaping in circles, and there was still whining, but it was only when he was really excited and wanted to let you know that he was so happy to see you. Doc was my constant companion for 3 years as roommates and boyfriends came and went. On my first unofficial, not quite a real date with my now husband Bart, we had a movie night. Doc took to Bart right away, sitting next to him on the couch. As the movie progressed, Doc decided that some herding was in order, so he started nudging Bart towards the middle of the couch, and then he climbed over both of us and did the same thing to me. So by the end of the movie, Bart and I were snug up against each other, and I could not have loved Doc more. When Doc and I moved in with Bart, I got a great man, and Doc got a great big backyard, which he set to patrolling right away. We were one big happy family. At 16 years old, Doc was diagnosed with kidney failure. The vet said he'd probably only live another 6 months, but at that point I didn't believe anything would ever kill this dog. True to form, it was nearly 2 years later when Doc finally started to slow down. I was 6 months pregnant when Doc, 18 years old, stopped eating, getting up, being perpetually in motion. When Bart and I took Doc to the vet for what we knew would be the last time, he was too weak to stand. He had to be carried to the car. Of course, when we got to the vet's office and opened the car door, Doc sprung out and started running in circles, sniffing the grass like he was as happy as could be. I didn't want to take him in the building, but he hadn't gotten up or eaten in days, and I knew this was just a temporary burst of energy. In the office, the vet gave us a few minutes alone with Doc, and I tried to say comforting things to calm him, but mostly just sobbed into his fur. Doc stood and vibrated and whined, but I didn't want him to stop. When the vet came back in, we tried to get Doc to sit or lay down, but he had not learned to do that in 18 years, and he wasn't about to try now. So he stood there as I held him, and they gave him the injection. 30 seconds later, he laid down forever. As I sat in that mostly empty townhouse, alone with Doc for the first time, I was wrong about a lot of things. Most especially, I was wrong in thinking I would be happy when that dog finally died, that he was a burden my mom had left me. Doc was my mom's gift to me. He was my dog for 8 years, my family, my love until I found my husband, and my baby until I had my own little girl. Doc would have loved her. She never sits still either. Thank you.